Let's be honest, facing a felony elder abuse charge is incredibly stressful. So in this explainer, we're going to cut right through all the confusion. We'll break down exactly what a Penal Code 368B1 charge means here in California and what you can expect in those critical hours right after an arrest.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll define the charge itself. Then, we'll walk through what happens right after an arrest. After that, we'll get into how bail bonds actually work, cover why getting released from custody is so critical, and finally, we'll look at the importance of navigating the local system.
If you or someone you love is going through this, you know it can feel completely overwhelming. The goal here is to give you a clear, step-by-step understanding of the road ahead so you can feel a little more in control.
Okay, first things first, let's really dig into the charge itself. What exactly is Penal Code's 368B1? Let's break down the legal foundation for what is a very serious charge.
So, in plain English, this law is all about protecting two really vulnerable groups: folks who are 65 and older and dependent adults who might have physical or mental limitations. Now, the key word you got to pay attention to here is willfully. This isn't about a simple accident. The charge implies that the action was intentional or at least highly reckless.
Now, what's really fascinating here is just how broad the definition of physical abuse is. It's not just the obvious things like hitting or shoving. It can also include things like using improper restraints, causing an injury because of neglect, or even something like deliberately withholding necessary medical care.
So you might be asking, what pushes this into the felony category instead of a lesser charge, like a misdemeanor? Well, prosecutors look at a few key things. The severity of the injuries is a huge one, especially if there was what the law calls great bodily injury. They'll also look at the defendant's prior criminal record, and again, that level of intent or recklessness.
Okay, so now that we have a handle on the charge, let's switch gears and talk about what happens right after an arrest is made. Believe me, those first 24 hours are absolutely critical.
Once someone is arrested, a pretty standard process kicks off. First, they're taken to jail and booked. Then, a judge sets a bail amount, which is usually based on a preset list for that specific charge in that county. And until that bail is paid or posted, the person stays in jail waiting for their first court appearance, which is called the arraignment.
And that bail amount, it can be a massive hurdle. For a felony elder abuse charge, seeing a bail of $50,000 is not unusual at all. In some cases, it can be much higher. And let's be real, for most families, coming up with that kind of cash on the spot just isn't going to happen.
So, with a huge bail amount standing between a person and their freedom, what's the solution? Well, this is where the bail bond system becomes so important. It provides a real, achievable path to getting out of custody.
And this slide lays out the two options perfectly. On one hand, you could pay the entire $50,000 directly to the court. You'd get that money back once the case is over. But the other option is to use a bail bond agent. You'd pay them a 10% premium, so in this case, $5,000. And they, in turn, guarantee the full $50,000 to the court.
Now, this is a super important point. That 10% premium you pay, it's a non-refundable fee. Think of it like this. You're paying for a service. The bail agent is taking on all the financial risk and guaranteeing to the court that the person will show up for their court dates.
We've just covered the how of getting out of jail, but now we really need to talk about the why. Why is it so incredibly important to secure that release and to do it fast? Well, the stakes could not be higher.
A conviction for felony elder abuse carries some really severe penalties. I mean, we are talking about 2 to 4 years or even more in state prison. We're talking about huge fines, long-term probation, and restraining orders. And a felony on your record, that can impact your ability to get a job or even find housing for the rest of your life. Preparing a strong defense is everything.
And that's exactly why being out on bail is such a game changer. It means you can meet with your lawyer freely whenever you need to. You can actually help build your own defense. You can keep your job, keep earning an income, and support your family. It gives you the space to deal with the incredible emotional stress of the situation from home, not from a jail cell.
Okay, for our final point, let's bring this right down to the local level. Because this process isn't the same everywhere. Navigating the courts and jails in places like Nevada, Placer, and Sierra counties, especially in a town like Truckee, it really requires specific, on-the-ground knowledge.
This quote really says it all. In these situations, every single minute matters. Any delay in starting the release process can easily mean extra hours or even days spent in jail, and that can have a huge effect on both the case and on a person's life. And this is truly where local expertise is priceless. Someone who knows the ins and outs of the jail in Nevada City versus the one in Auburn can make a world of difference. For example, knowing a small detail, like the fact that paperwork filed before 3 p.m. at the Placer County Jail gets processed that same day, that knowledge could be the difference between sleeping in your own bed or spending another night behind bars. They can just cut through the red tape and guide you through a system that can feel totally confusing.
So, when you're facing a charge this serious, your entire future is literally on the line. The choices you make in those first few hours can really set the tone for everything that comes next. So the real question you have to ask yourself is, what is the single most important first step you can take to protect yourself and your rights?